And welcome to this week's episode of Making It in Asheville. Making It in Asheville is your weekly podcast to hear some of the stories of Asheville's artists, entrepreneurs, makers, community leaders, and hear what they are making and how they are making it in Asheville. And this week we are joined by Jacob Ballard, who is the founder, CEO, creator, director, and parallel entrepreneur behind the Asheville print shop and screen printing and Nature Bound. And so there is a lot that I'm excited to talk to Jacob about in today's episode. But perhaps we just say, Jacob, please introduce yourself, and know that I want to immediately attack and unpack parallel entrepreneur.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here. I'm Jacob Ballard. Consider myself a parallel entrepreneur, as you mentioned, and excited to also talk about that. Originally from Florida, the central part of the state called Lakeland. I notice there's a lot of Floridians in Asheville, so hopefully I can resonate with some of you. I moved here in 2009 in Asheville. Graduated college from USF, and moving up here was one of the best decisions I ever made. Love Asheville. Consider West Asheville my home, and excited for this podcast, excited for just entrepreneurship and just conversations about it.
Amazing. Well, there's another vocab word that I've heard in the years since putting Asheville on our radar and then actually making the move, is the idea of the halfback landing in Asheville. So they start up in my neck of the woods, which was New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, as they call the tri-state area, go to Florida, say, you know what, it's a little too different. It's a little too hot. Maybe what's this hurricane nonsense all about? And then they find their way to the hills of Western North Carolina, and they're halfway back to New Jersey. So so we skipped the Florida part and met you here, and I'm excited also to talk about entrepreneurship. So parallel entrepreneur, talk to me. The word that most people will throw around is entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. We had a entrepreneur mother and son who actually are in Serial, which gave me so much life because that's a different take on the serial entrepreneur. But parallel entrepreneur versus serial. Talk to me.
Yeah, so I used to say serial, believe it or not, and entrepreneurship's just been in my soul since I can remember. There's actually a book. I don't want to take credit for the word myself, but there's actually a book called Parallel Entrepreneur. It's been a while since I've read it, but I knew for sure that I would take that word with me. I just think the word serial, typically is affiliated with something usually negative, in my opinion, other than entrepreneurship. And that I started to think about. And when I got my hands on that cover and that book, it was a game changer. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. But parallel, so you're just always constantly evolving. As an entrepreneur, it's important to not get complacent. And the book covers that. And as an entrepreneur, you're always testing new things and new ideas. And so I don't just say I'm a business owner or even just an entrepreneur. Parallel really describes like how I think, how I feel about entrepreneurship. And highly recommend you looking into it. If you Google it, you should find the gentleman's name.
And we'll at the very least have links to it on the show notes page. I'm making it in Asheville, potentially even call it out in the description on the players for the podcast. So we don't need to necessarily, but just in case, parallel to me, I'm assuming it has to do with multiple entrepreneurial endeavors happening at the same time? Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And then just new levels all the time as well. Just changing things up, trying new things, testing out ideas. It's what we do in day out.
Yeah. So how did that, when did parallel entrepreneur show up in your, Amazon search? When did you see it on the bookshelf? You said that you've been entrepreneur or entrepreneurial since forever. Let's unpack a little bit about of that. Like, when about did you really step into this? I'm a multiple business owner persona.
That's a great question. I'd say so. Moving into Asheville, it took a good year for me to find my entrepreneurial journey. I was focused more on just enjoying the environment, live music, different food. I grew up in a very cookie cutter type of place. A lot of chains would get tested where I'm from. Think, the show Weeds, little boxes,
Little boxes everywhere. Yeah, the intro music.
That's kind of how it feels. But I just found myself constantly starting a business and then having another idea and needing to fulfill that. And there was another good book that I read. I believe it was called The $100 Startup.
Chris Guillebeau or something Frenchy.
Yeah, that's a good one. And if I remember correctly, it was something along the lines of, if an idea is in your head and you can't let it go, write it down. If it stays with you, then you have to give it a shot. And I just find myself doing that, pretty frequently. And I'd say when Parallel really hit, probably 5-6 years ago, if I had to guess, it did pop up in Amazon, related to other books that I read or suggest. And if I remember correctly, I even found it possibly through the $100 Startup, but I could be wrong. Don't quote that. But I dove into the book. I'd say in a good 5 days, I finished it. I don't think it's a massive book by any means, but I was just hooked. And being as busy as I am, it's hard for me to sit down and read a couple hours at a time. But I was just hooked on that, and I didn't necessarily take away the mastermind plan to becoming an entrepreneur, but the whole parallel and understanding that there's a lot of us out there it felt good. So yeah, I guess you could say I really strapped down on that word 5, maybe 6 years ago and took ownership. I'm proud of it.
Great. And so maybe let's set the stage with where we are today. So you have Asheville Print Shop and Nature Bound. Maybe at a high level, we talk about each one and then hop into the story of how they started or what that $100 itch test felt like or looked like when you started them.
Yeah. So we'll talk about Asheville Print Shop and screen printing. So we pride ourselves in being a one-stop print shop. So we cover everything from digital printing, so signage, decals, stationery, letterheads, all kinds of fun, day-to-day printing that your average business is going to need. And then we do the whole merchandise side. So T-shirts, hats, patches, hoodies, tank tops, and it didn't start out that way, believe it or not. It started with digital printing and printing signage or printing stickers and just really enjoying essentially the way I used to describe the printing company was every client that would come in that we haven't worked with before, and it would be all different levels. Somebody comes in with an idea and maybe they have a sketch on a sticky note. Essentially, those are tiny little micro businesses that we get to start and really help. I like to tell the team here today that we provide the most value to companies that are maybe that 1, 5, 10 person team, because the reality is, as a business owner and a small business owner, you're strapped for resources, for time, for capabilities. And so we can come in and just make it really easy to have a conversation or take a design and bring it to life and then transfer it consistently across all different print avenues. Business cards, hats, vehicle wraps. I mean, essentially we say we print almost everything other than most round objects and carpet. So we try to stay away from complex items and such as those. But it started out with a few things. And we found that there's a lot of opportunity to do more than just a sticker or a T-shirt. And why not just truly partner up with our clients and figure out how to do some of these other printing techniques. And so over the years, we've really developed and added to our toolbox or our arsenal of different things that we can offer. So we're excited about that. And so that's Asheville Print Shop and Screen Printing. All in all, I guess I've been in the printing industry for about 10 years. Started a clothing company in college while in Florida. We can touch more on that if you'd like, but really just got frustrated with the quality of designs and then this might actually be about 13 years ago, believe it or not, but I don't know if you remember MySpace pages. I used to customize and design MySpace pages. They were called div layouts, and got really obsessed with the clothing company that I was, building. And then I started having people like ask, how'd you do that? Or I wasn't by any means the first person to do that. I was able to dig and find out like how to do it just because I was interested and passionate about it. And so my start into printing came with a clothing company that I started in Florida.
Amazing.
Before I'm here, actually.
Amazing. And then Nature Bound.
Yeah, so Nature Bound is the product of our experiences. So the way I used to describe Nature Bound is when I initially started, essentially it is my advice day in, day out to companies or breweries or brands that want to develop their merchandise. Like, how do you figure out what sells? What colors do you test? What type of products? What brands and why are you working with these brands? So it was a pretty frequent conversations, a few times, like multiple times a day. So finally, it started on a trip called the Transamerican Trail. I knew I wanted to start and test my formulas and ideas that I try to teach people. But so there's a trail called the Transamerican Trail. Essentially, that is the Appalachian Trail for off-road vehicles. A lot of people do it on motorcycles. They're called dual sports. My brother and my partner and his family, we all decided to go on this trip. It's not something you can Google map by any means. You have to get proprietary maps and what's called roll charts. The majority of the trail is non-marked. For example, a roll chart is go 2.6 miles and turn right on the dirt road. And you would be lucky if you got dirt roads. So we got lost several times, and we had a lot of time to think. It was a good, it was a busy year, a much needed vacation right in the middle of early or late spring, and so had a lot of time to reflect in nature. I took a Jeep, and actually on the Nature Bound website, you'll see a picture of my brother and myself in our vehicles. He took a Land Rover and I took a Jeep. We had what's called rooftop tents. At the time they were pretty rare, and the developments weren't what they are today. So it was a pretty good test of trying out new equipment, and we obviously used the tents before going on this trip, but it was completely isolated. So we would see these mountain ranges, and few hours later, we'd be on private roads, that really nobody else is out. I remember specifically in Colorado, we hit switchback turns, which are essentially really sharp turns, very thin roads on side of mountains. And, 14,000 feet multiple times, very, very interesting roads. So during that trip, we would finish up some of these isolated routes and pop into these really small mountain towns. And one of them I really remember was called Salida, Colorado. And so immediately we would go into these towns and pop into a shop or two and just try to get groceries, use the bathroom if we could. And I would immediately get drawn to the merchandise and printing section of gifts and stickers and hats and T-shirts. And they really just highlighted like the town. And to me, in printing, they were decent, but I knew that, hey, I could do this. And not only could I do this, but I think I could make it way better. And so I started thinking, continuing on the trip, and really had a lot of time to come up with the name. And the name just hit me right there on the spot. I mean, it's towards the end of the trip, but it was Nature Bound. Nature Bound Co. I really liked that name. And so, that trip, a lot of time in nature, a lot of time in the mountains and isolation and off-road. It was an amazing trip. I'll never forget it. That is ultimately where Nature Bound started. So fast forward to coming back off the trip, I would say it was probably 2, maybe 3 weeks before I actually started doing anything. And when I initially started, I launched with 4 stores. So one of them was the Chamber of Commerce. The other was Second Gear. They were kind enough to really let me test the idea of the merchandise and seeing what I could do. And so started with a few T-shirts that kind of idolized and honed in on the beautiful nature that we have. For example, Max Patch. I don't know if you've ever been there, but that's one of my favorite hikes here locally. That was one of the designs that I started with, and people really started to dig it. We started with T-shirts and did really well. So tested in those 4 stores, and the rest is history. We really started to pivot into stickers shortly after that first initial test, and just going crazy on colors and vibrancy and customization and more designs. I'd say now we have close to 800, maybe 900 designs, and we customize them specific to the area, or we create new highlights of areas that we're not in. We sell in places like REI, state parks, national parks, a lot of outdoor specialty retailers. And yeah, it's been awesome. So in my opinion, there's 4 levels of printing. Okay.
Talk to me.
The first level is going to be contract printing. And so contract printing is typically like very inexpensive, very little customer service, and a shop that's just set up to do like massive amounts. For example, Walmart needs 1.2 million T-shirts for their staff. A contract printer is going to be best set up to just handle that and maybe do 5 jobs over the course of a year or a quarter. So that'd be level 1, like the first level. Sorry about that.
It's okay. This makes this episode seem more NPR styles. Do you need to be at that phone though?
No.
Okay.
Yes. So level 2 is wholesale. So, and that's what we do at Asheville Print Shop. Okay. So wholesale printing would be, really strong customer service, making it really easy to work with. We have the bandwidth to work with those smaller companies or even the bigger companies, but we're not set up to necessarily do hundreds of thousands of shirts. So that's kind of level 2, a step up. It's what we do really good at, and it's kind of made us who we are today. The third level is wholesale retail, and so that's what I've worked very hard on getting with NatureBound. So think
got it.
Not quite at the retail level, but wholesale. And the beautiful part about that is, for us specifically with NatureBound, is we are essentially the manufacturer. And so we're very agile. If I'm a brand and I need to be at this level, I usually have to work with either the first level or the second level of printing. And so the fact that we are the second level and now worked our way up to the third level, in my eyes, is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Because everything we make essentially is made to order. So we get an order, we make stickers and other merchandise and T-shirts. There's almost zero waste, which is kind of what we're about at NatureBound too. And then the final level would be retail, or what some people call D2C, or direct to customer. And so that obviously has like the highest margins when you're talking, okay, what level of business are we on here? But the reality is you also have the most risk. So if I'm an Under Armour or a Nike or a Lululemon, I have to guess how many of each color of every SKU that I have in each size. And so there's a lot of reward there, but there's also the most risk. And so you can have 1 or 2 bad years of overproducing or over manufacturing, and it can be very costly. And so in those 4 levels, in my eyes, that's how I explain the industry. But then there was this mastermind that happened, and I'm sure you've heard about it, but there's a thing called the outlet malls.
Yes.
And so that's like level 3.5. And so some mastermind group came together and was like, hey, we're at this retail level and we have all this stock. What do we do with it? We don't want to sell it and wholesale retail, because then we don't make any money. And how do we get between? And so, in my opinion, I believe that's how the whole outlet malls and that channel of in between wholesale retail all the way to retail kind of spun off. So.
I think that's a great 4-tier model. It makes perfect sense to me. And then the idea of de-risking any one of those models, right? If you're level 1 contract printing and Walmart changes who they want to order from because somebody knows somebody or whatever, you've now lost 20% of your business or 100% of your business.
Or 100.
Yeah, risky.
And that happens pretty often. And in printing, relationships are pretty important. And, you have all your eggs in 4 or 5 relationships. It's a pretty risky place to be. But there are companies that are successful with that. And usually they're massive, massive companies with 30, 40 automatic machines and hundreds of people. And that's not what would excite me anyway. So I'm not really interested in that. So
where do you place, and I'm speaking a little bit outside of my depth, but I do pay a tiny bit of attention to printing. Where do you place some of the newer technology in printing, like not D2C, direct to consumer, but D2G, direct to garment type of technology, which, it seems to cost more, right? But you carry less inventory and you can potentially test a concept on a low scale. It's interesting, right? Like this is I think we live in I outsider says like printing is in some sort of a revolution where there are some gigantic, I feel myself floating in this question, but I grew up in a time where, custom ink showed up on internet for like the first time. And I remember in high school, we tried to use the online t-shirt mock-up and it's come a super far way in 20 years. And I'm wondering, where do you place things like that? Because what it was missing was humans, and what was missing is like, it's in town and I don't know who I'm actually buying from. It's the man. I'd rather have a face and a name and a person. But then, hashtag margins matter. And I don't want to commit as a retailer to buying 1,000, units of a garment.
Exactly. No, you hit on a very interesting topic. So we actually offer direct to garment. I got a phone call about 4 years ago from a guy actually going out of business saying, "Hey, I've got a blah, blah, blah Epson DTG machine." And I was like, "What?" Yeah, I'm familiar with it, and started looking into it. And this was on like a Friday afternoon. Well, I spent the entire weekend researching, figuring it out because I was very interested. And so the difference for everybody listening, so direct to garment is essentially a disruptor to the industry of screen printing. When we print shirts, there's a few different ways to print or decorate them. One of them being primarily what we do and still the majority of the industry is screen printing. The second would be embroidery or kind of like heat pressing, or there's a few different techniques that I would consider specialty that I would classify in that second step. And then the third would be the newest, and that would be direct to garment, or essentially digital printing. And so with direct to garment, it comes in and disrupts the industry of screen printing. So you actually you are familiar with printing, and you hit some of those pain points. So the reality is direct to garment eliminates the minimums for setup. So with screen printing, every color has to be set up, and it's a very labor intensive but very art specific form of printing. It has no minimums as far as like how many you need to order. So it eliminates the setup, eliminates the minimum, and it's unlimited colors. And so what's happening in the industry is there's a huge shift with, I don't need to order 24 of this size and 16 of this size. And yeah, I pay a higher price, but I don't have to house those specific garments and then ship them. So we offer not only direct to garment, but we also offer order fulfillment.
Oh, wow.
and drop shipping with white labeling. So if it needs to come from making it in Asheville and you want to insert flyers and packaging, we can do that. So let's talk about the cons of direct to garment, because there's a lot of really nice things to go with.
It seems like a dream, and I just to paint it, because I'm a very visual type person. The way that I imagine it, I tried to watch a YouTube video or two about it, is, how like a old school printer, like a computer printer, would go like back and forth and like slowly draw whatever you were writing on the page. Same idea, except instead of paper moving through the printer, the shirt is static, and the printer itself is moving across and on top of the shirt or the garment or whatever the thing is. Is that right?
Exactly. Yep, that's exactly.
And it's throwing ink onto it in like a perfect way, and it works the same. Whereas like, color printer, you can get whatever colors, and color garment, you can get whatever colors. As opposed to, it looks, when I watch screen printing, it's like you have to make some sort of a cast, and then it sits on top of the shirt, and you can do it by hand and like draw the colors across it, or a giant machine comes down and like presses the shirts and does it in one shot or one color at a time shot. And it looks nuts. And sometimes they look like giant like carnival rides where you have like 6 of them going, 10 of them going, as opposed to like a single iron at a time.
Yes, that's exactly right. You hit it right on.
Okay.
Screen printing, every color needs to be printed by color, even like a temporary dry called a flash dry, when you start to add other colors on typically. So we have a manual screen print machine. We also have an automatic, which is what you're describing, where it's a machine and really increases your capacity and the consistency as well. So the machine is more consistent than your hands, or if you've been printing for 6 hours all day and your fingers are really sore, you're not going to be 100% consistent like a machine would. So there's benefits of both, but also getting a machine set up is a little bit more time consuming than your manual screen print press. So you hit it right on. Let's talk more about direct to garment.
Yeah.
So as you described, think a big inkjet, a giant inkjet printer that prints directly to the garment, the fabric. We can do tote bags, we can do T-shirts, we can do face masks. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with direct to garment. Now here's the downside. Typically, it's cotton fabrics mostly. And so the reality is there's a lot of people that want tri-blends or polyester or so direct-to-garment is a water-based ink printing machine. So the water base is really going to bond with cotton best. And so it does really good for cotton. And the reality is the industry is still missing the component. The trickiest part of direct-to-garment is the white ink. And so when you print on, let's say, a black shirt, let's try to visualize this. If you want a really colorful photo, which we can do on a black shirt, you have to do what's called Pretreat. And so in the white ink, let's geek out a little bit. There's a solvent component in the ink that needs to bond with the fabric. And so without this chemical, it's called a Pretreat chemical, the white ink will not stick to the garment, which would not show the color on top of the white ink. So any shirt that's getting lighter ink than the shirt color would need to be pre-treated. And so that process with the white ink still has a long way to come. There are industrial level machines that, range $300, $600, even $1 million in cost. So $300,000 to $1 million for an industrial size machine that takes care of that pre-treat process, lays down the white ink, and then the color on top. So there is some evolution there, but it's still got a pretty good way to go. And for the majority of the shops, other than the bigger companies like you mentioned, Custom Ink, or Amazon even has a pretty large infrastructure in place for print on demand. In fact, I've seen them open it up 2 different times, and they've had to close it in 48 hours just because of the demand.
Wow.
So what direct-to-garment is doing is it is essentially turning any designer or anybody that wants to start a clothing company, if you have a digital mock-up of your shirt, you can really just start to sell products and be a brand, which is good. But the reality is direct-to-garment is not as nice of a product as screen printing, in my opinion, and the higher cost as you start to grow, you're really going to want to work away from that direct-to-garment printing process.
That's what the internet has told me as well. I think that what you pointed out is it allows for perhaps a speed to idea to execution. One of the things I find myself constantly saying to people is like, well, don't dream about it. Like, sell the thing. Like, don't say, hey, what, like, we just posted it, so I'll slap my own hand. But we said, like, what if we started selling products? What would you do? I think it's better to say, this is $20.
Yeah.
Do you want to buy it? If yes, bing, it goes off and gets printed. Even better if it gets shipped from where it prints. And what that does is allows me to forecast, all right, so what if we actually leaned into this? But I don't want to buy 100 shirts from you. I want the ability to sell a shirt.
For sure.
Yeah.
And
then once you start to do some things like forecast, you can make some guesses and be a little itty bitty baby Lululemon and carry a little bit of risk. It's seemingly better if I can say, hey, Asheville print shop and screen print, can you hold a couple of these, ship them for me when they sell, when we get down to 5, run another batch, as opposed to, I'm going to go ahead and take 200,000 units. That's not the type of business that I'm excited to build. That sounds risky.
Yeah. And so there's another thing we offer. It would be essentially the same thing, eliminating the risk. It's what we call a campaign. So really just a glorified pre-order. So the image would look as if it's already printed, which our design team could help, pull that off. And it has a start date and an end date. And once the end date is up, there's expectations on realistically when we will actually start producing these garments. And if you only sell 9 of them, well, then we probably need to look at direct to garment. But typically over 24 pieces is a really good candidate for screen printing. And so if the sales, are there in that campaign, it's pretty easy to eliminate that risk and say, okay, well, why not pay $8 a shirt versus $15 a shirt? So there are ways around testing ideas and concepts. And what I'm most excited about now, specifically with direct to garment, is there's a new setup. It's called the digital Squeegee. And so the paint, as I mentioned, is that white ink and that pre-treat. So now there's technology called the digital Squeegee, where you have a very large screen printing machine that lays down a screen printed white underbase, which eliminates multiple screens setting up, because really all you would need to do is line up a screen of the white ink, and then the direct to garment print head without the white ink comes in and lays over 20, 30, 50 colors.
Wow.
And so that is changing the way screen printing is happening. Now, they haven't been out long enough to see, are the heads clogging up with that screen printing ink underneath? Because the reality is the problem with the white ink is that the white ink clogs up the print head. And if the print head is clogged up, then the printer doesn't work. So
holy moly.
Yeah, that is going to be a game changer for even the large contract printers. If you're printing 12 colors, what we would call spot color, you'd have to make 12 different screens, set up 12 different Pantone specific inks. Well, now what's happening is it lays in that white underbase and unlimited color. So it's a game changer.
That seems huge. And so I love the synergy, the how your two businesses seem to complement each other and in some ways maybe hedge each other in like a riskiness. One is I need other people's businesses to do well to keep the core of my business humming. The other is I need to have seemingly relationships, some good designs that someone can click and say, I want that one. Give me 100 of them, or give me 10 of them, or give me 1,000 of them. And so like one is other people need to sell well, and then we need to serve well and support them. This is like, if we get in front of enough people with the right look, this is going to go off, and the scale is great, and the margins are probably really good because you're sitting in the middle carrying almost no risk.
Exactly. Yeah, you hit it right on. There's two differences. What we do with the print shop is helping people, and there's a lot of back and forth. For example, we'll put together a design where you tell us blue and you were thinking a completely different blue. So there's a lot of back and forth just with helping you finalize what you want your print to look like. And that's what we pride ourselves in. And so there's a lot of that communication. On the flip side of Nature Bound, it's the complete opposite. So there's no back and forth. It's here's your designs, or answer these questions for us for your favorite popular state parks or hiking trails in the area. Let us do some research and let us design with our brand and our style. And then you just choose the design. So we have catalogs that, different states or regions can choose from. And I'll take this design, I'll take this one, and we have minimum order. So it's been awesome because it eliminates that back and forth and really allows us to focus on what we're good at, which is creating a strong design, a quality product, and something that resonates and hopefully sells well. And we've been doing pretty good at that.
That's amazing. So I'd love to think about building a business that has hard assets, that the assets have costs and those assets work, right? They need, in order for your printer, you mentioned one was up to $1 million. You imagine you don't have that one, but you have things that cost real money to purchase, and they need to return on their investment if they're doing a good job. So the more that your printers are printing, the better. The more that your squeegees are squeegeeing, the better. How did you get started in printing? So you mentioned maybe 10 years or so of print experience. Did you work in a shop? At what point were you like, this guy's a knucklehead, I can do this better? Or, let me move to a new market and try this myself because this is interesting. I'd love to go back maybe to the beginning of this print business exposure and strategy.
Yeah, so I'm sure you've heard of the UFC, like Ultimate Fighting Championships. In college, my first step into printing was starting my own clothing company. And so at the time, mixed martial arts, or MMA, was explosive in Florida and in California.
If you tell me that you started Affliction, I'm going to go out of my mind.
No, actually, they were the biggest player, and that's really what motivated me to say, these are cool designs, but I feel like we could do something different. And so.
And in case anyone's missing, I mean, it's hard if you don't know what that means. Like that's it's particular. But there was like a real hot run where like Von Dutch had like a very strong look and feel, and then trucker hats came back, and then Affliction was just like hard, like kind of hardcore tattoo like designs on T-shirts that like left. It was more than just words on over the heart or like a drawing in the center. It like went over the shoulders. Like there was a time where design was very aggressive and in your face. Ripped jeans were coming back with aggression, studs on stuff. So like this is the time that you're talking about where you're like, Affliction exists, MMA is huge. Exactly. I'm going to build a brand for this type of demographic.
Yeah, and Affliction would even do what's called acid wash T-shirts, and that's when I really started to dive more into the T-shirts and like what separates just like a black shirt from a shirt that has like all these different looks and colors and different fades. And so I started learning that was an acid wash T-shirt, and then how did they get the print so big and in your face? There was another company that I'd say is more than likely bigger than Affliction. It was called Tap Out, and so they were the biggest in the space, and it was really just one word on a lot of their designs, and they had brand placement. So we were, in an explosive state. I really think that California and Florida were the biggest parts of the country for that. And so a pay-per-view, just to put this into perspective, would be every 6-8 weeks maybe. Now you can turn on ESPN and there's a full section for this. It's weekly. It's sometimes daily. There's even reality TV shows that went like 20 seasons. This was before all of that started. And so there was a lot of these smaller promotions. And same thing, tested a few designs and came up with a name called Dynasty Fightwear. And really unique, smaller batch artisan feel, not necessarily the large Affliction in your face. It was something we were trying to do a little different, and actually started it at in college. So worked part-time, went to college, and then started this clothing brand. And it had got to where we would travel around the Southeast and pop up at shows, and people really liked our stuff. And we were competing with some huge companies that had $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 advertising budget maybe for that show, and they got their name on the ring. Well, we would sell 3, maybe 4 shirts to their one, and people would just come up and be like, "Oh, I love what you're doing," and being a passionate person, interacting with people. I really like what you're doing. I can tell you're going somewhere with this. And so fast forward a couple months or even a year.
And just to make sure I'm tracking, you're using a print shop to pull off your brand, right? So you're working as a brand. So this is level 4, and you're working with a level 2 wholesale design shop to execute some of your visions.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. That's exactly right. And just started diving in more. We got to a point where, everything we made, every dollar, and I had a partner with this who's still one of my best friends. We realized that, this was more of a lifestyle business. And that was one that I really just had to, maybe could have sold or done something financially from it, but I really just bowed out. I said, hey, this has taught me a lot. I've interacted with promoters and events, and we've endorsed certain fighters, and really got a lot of professional experience and entrepreneurial experience. But I know this isn't going to sustain, a career for me, or I know this isn't going to pay my bills necessarily, because the reality was everything we made, we put back into to the business. And so as I moved up here, I really just bowed out of the business and said, super thankful. I'm gonna start fresh up here, experience some new things, and get a different taste of life. And so moved up to Asheville, kind of put down the printing, started to learn more design, and really get into website design and marketing. Really been passionate about marketing. So really dove into internet marketing and website design and even search engine optimization. Did that for about 5 years, built that company up to about 22 different contractors, and had some awesome clients. And so that kind of helped me learn design, and then quickly realize that, I'm not the best designer by any means, and why not find somebody, because I know that I'm decent at business, and so why don't I focus on business? And so got into marketing, got into more design, got into just growing more companies, and then I started a software company. And really the software company was a product of the synergy of helping keep my team busy. I've got 22 people that need to stay busy. So the software company was really a event marketing company, in the sense of, hey, you're putting on a 5K or a running event, and we'd love to help you with your marketing. So we'll help you with the website of things, where you collect names and shirt sizes and you get a waiver signed. We'll also help you with what your poster should look like to promote the event, and we'll even help you with t-shirts. And so fast forward about 1.5 years into that, I had 4 or 5 events that needed a handful of shirts, and said, you know what, this is a great opportunity to see if I can get into actually printing everything for these events. And so went on Craigslist, started looking at equipment. Next thing you know, buying the equipment, started it at my house in a barn, and just grew it into what it is today. There's been a lot of people that have helped, and yeah, I'm super excited to be involved. Initially, I wasn't really interested in the production side of things, more so just the business side and the marketing side, and going and meeting with new people to seeing what kind of value we could provide to people. So it's been an awesome ride. And as I mentioned, we didn't just start with printing stickers. It was a few different things. And the next thing you know, the client wants to talk about, well, how do I embroider this? And I'm Googling or figuring out how to do this, and maybe even YouTube. And so over time, we've just added different pieces of equipment and different services, and just tried to really be agile and evolve and adapt to what our customers need.
Wow. So at what point did actually printing kind of start? When would you date stamp that? 2014, 2015?
I'd say 2014.
2014?
When we started, I started with a company called RX Prints. And so that was a niche company that we were internet based, really. So background internet marketing and websites, built this really cool website. And another explosive industry, I'm sure you've heard of it, was CrossFit.
Know it well. Yeah.
So RX is, prescribed. And so we niched out and doubled down on that brand, and, ended up building a spreadsheet of close to 6,000 gyms that were popping up. And what I liked about CrossFits were, they all had the unique look. It wasn't one, sports team that has to follow these colors. They all have different, components that make up their gym, and they all love T-shirts and
community.
And community. And it's not, hey, I just need 24 shirts of this color, and it has to be the cheapest shirt. And we do a lot of that. But the reality is, we really enjoy making nice garments, nice products. And so CrossFits were, basically the cheerleader of what we were trying to do. And, we had some success.
How interesting. So one last question is the software company, did you exit that, or did you just shut it down? Or is it still around?
It slowly kind of died out. I reached a point where I utilize open source technology, so it wasn't proprietary technology. There was a time where I was going to raise money and really develop proprietary technology, but that kind of got put on hold because of the explosiveness of the print. And so the company's still around. There's not really much activity, especially with events now.
Yeah.
But the reality is that is what started really buying equipment and getting into the printing world. I remember to this day, the first shirt that we printed was for an event called the Main Street Mile, which I'm sure is still around. It might not be happening right now with coronavirus, but really it's this street downhill in Waynesville on Main Street, and it's a mile running as fast as you can. And that was the first job we printed. So shout out to Eric Yarrington and Main Street Mile.
I love that. So there's something that comes up for me as you go through your story right there was, movie stars want to be rock stars want to be movie stars, stage actors want to get into film wants stage. And they're seemingly, there's always this like entrepreneurial grass is greener. It's like, oh, I'm in service. It would be great to have a software business. Like it would just be so, SaaS, people are paying for a year at a time. Like I know exactly what to forecast. Oh, I'm in SaaS. I really wish I just had a physical product. Like I wish I was just selling a physical product. It would be so much easier if I could just like have a widget, output, sell it, put a price on it, get rid of it, and it seems like you've touched most of those, grass is greener environments. You might even have, a foot in all of the yards, metaphorically. And I'm wondering, across them all, is there a type of business now that gives you the most excitement, or that if it came across your brain in a dream or across your desk in an opportunity, those are the type that you think are most interesting today?
Yeah, great question. It's funny you ask that. I guess what you could say now I call my side hustle. Well, first off, I'm really interested in just printing. It comes back to that, micro businesses that we help. I don't necessarily help day in, day out on the customer side of things, but being able to help somebody start and take an idea all the way, and then they come back and order, and then they build their team, and it's like, hey, I need stuff for my new employees, and yeah, let's look at hats, and I really want people to look professional. That really excites me. And then the nature bound side, coming up with the idea and figuring out what is we want to highlight, and also bring awareness to these popular spots in nature is really exciting. But then here recently, my side hustle, I guess you could call, is golf carts. And it's funny because, my entrepreneurial journey started, I'd say, around 6 years old. And so the way I describe this story is, I had a single mom with two brothers. So there was three of us at the time. And I grew up in Florida. And so I couldn't stand even at a young age, being inside. The weather was always beautiful. I would skateboard, I would bike. We used to go to the movie theater when I was 6 or 7 years old, and really love that experience. I'm an extroverted person, so I get a lot of energy from being around people or in new places or coffee shops or breweries or what have you. And so going to that movie theater, I got a lot of energy. I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I remember to this day wanting to go to the movie theater, and my mom telling me that we couldn't because we didn't have any money. And I was like, well, what do you mean we don't have any money? And so at the time, a movie theater ticket was probably $2, $3 maybe. Hopefully not dating myself, but I learned at a very young age that I could solve problems. And so what I mean by that is I lived in this neighborhood. So we actually lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, and my 2 brothers and I shared 1 bedroom, but we were linked to maybe 100 or 150 different apartments, and every one of them had cars. And so in Florida, cars are a big deal. People really treat their cars differently. They customize them, they keep them clean, from what I've noticed up here, and it's interesting. And so I would go and knock on doors and say, hey, we're trying to go to a movie, and we'd love to wash your car. Give us $1 and we'll wash your car. I don't remember if it was $1 or $2 or whatever, but we would do just enough to get movie tickets for us, and we would go. We would finish. Sometimes it would take 2 hours. Sometimes it would take all day, or maybe the weekend, or maybe we couldn't get it that weekend and we had promises for the next weekend. But it was really hard to turn me down and telling my story. Hey, we want to go to the movie. We'll wash your car. We got our soap right here. And once they would give me the yes, I would grab my 2 brothers and say, okay, let's wash this car. I'm going to go try to get another car so we can go see Batman or whatever it was. And so that started my entrepreneurial journey. But then let's fast forward to maybe 10, 11 years old, if I recall. We moved out of the apartment complex into a big neighborhood in Florida. It's called a deed-restricted community. It was actually Mulberry, Florida. Not sure if you've heard of it. Shout out Mulberry, Florida. So I grew up in this really big neighborhood. It had a golf course in it with a whole different side of it, golf course community, and then a bunch of just normal houses. Think back to that Weeds, little houses, little boxes. And so they all had their yards. And I started offering lawn cutting services, as a lot of people do in Florida. And same thing, lawns are a big deal in Florida just because of the season, and started cutting grass. Well, that turned into hiring my friends. And, at one point in time, I think I had like 26 lawns to cut per week at like $20 to $25 each. And that was a lot of money.
Sure.
And so I just naturally started to try to grow. And so being 11, 12 years old, I couldn't drive. So I started getting into golf carts. And over the course of the 4 or 5 years, I ended up having 4 golf carts. And they were used to pull a trailer to cut yards. And so it comes back full circle to childhood and the nostalgic piece of, childhood and entrepreneurship. And so last year, 2020, I bought a neighbor's golf cart. And, it needed some work, and fixed it up, loved it, drove it around. It wasn't fast enough.
Sure.
So then I started looking into more golf carts. Well, fast forward, I have about 13 golf carts right now that will be prepped and customized and lifted. And it's something I try not to really touch myself. I hire a friend that's doing like all the customization, or sometimes my brother will help. He's very mechanical.
Yeah.
And so we get these golf carts that come like directly off a golf course and customize them and turn them into these
sick,
awesome like camping, off-road jacked up, And then now my brain's starting to turn a little bit on, well, what if we put a logo on it and, customized it for, but really just a side hustle. I try not to spend on it, but it's been fun. And I'd say that's pretty exciting, because now I got all these different golf carts that I can, just drive around the neighborhood, but I try not to get attached to any of them as well, because really just going to let them all go.
Yeah, so I don't want to hype that side hustle too much, but where I am right now, there is a custom wrapped, gorgeous golf cart, and I think that you're onto something. Sarah's has cousins in Charleston, and Charleston has a very I'll call it friendly to golf cart street laws, where it's like, if it goes under 25, you're good to go, or like over 20, but under 25, you can do something specific. I was told it once, it didn't stick, but like there are a lot of golf carts in Charleston.
They're up everywhere, like LA, New York. They're now becoming street legal, but then like all the beach towns, like I was in Jackson, which is where I was born last year, and they were everywhere. And it's a very, short distance, quick and go, very convenient and fun way that even kids, actually, you should look this up. I discovered this last year through just like being interested in. There's a town in Georgia called Peachtree City. It's got over 100 miles of golf cart trails, and the high school there has over, I believe it's 150 parking spots for kids. And so kids get to drive golf carts to school. Peachtree City, Georgia. Look it up.
Wow. Peachtree is the most common, I think, street name in the state of Georgia. And I will look that up. I love it. I think it's interesting. I think that the hybrid that you're painting for me of like a four-wheeler and a golf cart is interesting. It has my attention. The idea that these are camping golf carts, even more. Can't wait to see it. Here's another thread that I'm now identifying is tied a bunch of these bits of the story together, is your ability to identify and proactively hop into trends, like meaningful culture moments that are substantial enough to really make money in, and to ride like culture waves. How do you think about trends? How do you at this point? Because one of the conversations I've had recently is, the better you're doing, the more opportunities will come to you, and at a certain point you need to get as good at identifying the good ones from the great ones, because while having a lot of balls in the air is great, the likelihood that some fall becomes, greater. And while parallel entrepreneurship is great, there's another important book called The One Thing. And so certain people, certain minds shouldn't juggle. Some, yours and mine perhaps, like can and should, but even still, it seems like there should be some sort of, or could be, one might benefit from saying, I need to get this thing to this stage before adding something else. I need to get this thing to this stage. I can't say yes to 5 things right now. I can say yes to one. And so, like, how are you thinking about trends? How are you thinking about taking a business to a stage before looking for the next thing to run in parallel? Yeah.
So you mentioned synergy a few minutes back, and I feel like I've done a good job at if I'm starting a new business, it usually is going to complement the other. For example, the website came from design or MySpace, and the software came from the website, keeping the team busy. The printing came from generating more opportunities from the software. And then the software or the printing turned into creating our own brand to keep machines running, as you mentioned, or just keeping busy. And so I think synergy's been important in capitalizing on trends and starting ideas, but this whole golf cart thing's kind of challenging that. But so I think back to the initial part of the conversation, the $100 startup, keeping your ideas, if they stay on your mind and you can't let them go, that's a clear sign of, hey, I really should probably test this idea or make some moves. In my opinion, the reality is there's a lot of people that have ideas and way better ideas than me, or even Bill Gates possibly, or even Jeff Bezos. But where the difference is the execution and the persistence, not giving up. I remember a quote somewhere that was, the difference between an entrepreneur and somebody that's not is an entrepreneur is never going to give up. And entrepreneurship is a roller coaster. There's really, really good highs and really bad lows, and it's consistency and execution. So if you have those ideas, figuring out how to execute. But then also, like you mentioned, focusing. So focus is a challenge for, I think, all entrepreneurs, unless there's an accidental entrepreneur. And what I mean by that is somebody that's really strong programmer is created a product and there's a huge demand for it. And next thing you know, he's got this massive company because he was really good at programming, but wasn't the tenacious, I've got an idea. How do I monetize it? How do I turn it into a business? And so execution and consistency, and you got to figure out what works for you. For me, having those ideas and not the same thing day to day is what keeps me, amped up and excited.
Heard. With your current workload, how do you think about your days, your weeks, your months with multiple projects running in parallel?
That's a good question. Got a baby now, 13 months today.
Wow!
So
congrats.
That's really, I've been a huge fan of podcasts and listening to people that have knowledge. One thing that I enjoy doing, even on my free time, is documentaries or just YouTube or just podcasts. If I go running, I usually try to double up and listen to a podcast. So not only am I exercising, but I'm also taking in information. If I'm at the gym, I'm doing the same thing. I'm working out, but I'm also taking in as much information as I can. Focus is like I said, a challenge for entrepreneurs. And so with multiple projects, with a baby now, I really have to focus my time. And so it's not something that comes easy to me, but it's definitely something that's on my radar and has me becoming more selective on where do I spend my time. Do I need to help process this 40-piece shirt order when I can be looking for somebody else to bring onto the team, or figuring out different marketing strategies, or reaching out to more accounts possibly for NatureBound, because the success rate for the time that I spend in NatureBound is very strong. And so it's a balance. It's a dance. Life is a dance. Life is a constant need for improvement. Don't become stagnant. Don't get comfortable. Always get uncomfortable. Grow. And that's a lot of stuff, but the reality is that's how I feel.
Yeah. With multiple projects, with what I'll say is, the synergy, what shows up for me is the idea of finding, Venn diagram type next projects that there's some version of an overlap. So growth anywhere theoretically could be growth across all of the domains. When thinking about your businesses, were there ever moments where you felt that you had to go, I'll say, all in and take meaningful risk? Because one of the things that's what I'm seeing is like it sounds like across all the projects, and as perhaps hyperbolically or as exemplified by the $100 startup, taking small risks and stacking those small risks up trends towards a success, right? Like the likelihood of no single moment being catastrophic is almost 100% if you're taking smaller but larger, every time larger risk. Have there been moments across your entrepreneurial journey where you kind of had to go all in to take the next step, to go to the next phase? Or have you intentionally built your businesses such that there was never a moment where things were hanging on by a single success?
Yeah, good question. I think every entrepreneur has a challenge with risk daily. Some are less than others, but the reality is any idea or any business, when you start, is a risk. It's a gamble. The strategy that I try to take is eliminating as much risk as possible. So every business that I've ever been involved in or started, I've done what's called bootstrapping. So in my eyes, borrowing $50,000 or $100,000 to start a business is a huge risk. And so, I've seen fellow entrepreneurs or other businesses leverage credit cards for a year with zero interest. I've seen entrepreneurs borrow on their house, and it's about eliminating the risks, in my opinion. And I've tried to do that many times, but a big piece of the printing company, there was a risk in starting that and buying the equipment, because I don't know if we're going to do anything else outside of these few events. And that company specifically, when I started, I didn't pay myself for almost 2 years.
Wow.
And in addition to that, I was really running up my electric bill. And, my electric bill on a monthly basis was $600, sometimes $650 just running equipment. And that was tough. And there was times where, I was really concerned, is this going to work? Like, at what point do I say, all right, I have to pay myself? Or what am I going to do about this electric bill? And I remember, being very relationship-based with printing, and even internet-based on top of that. Collecting deposits was a challenge when you're remote. And so I used to process a lot of shirt orders without a deposit. And so what that led to was a cash flow issue. And there were many nights where I would have, $20,000, $30,000 on an American Express in my name personally, not a business name, with $5,000 or $10,000 in the bank. And that was a huge stress. I almost couldn't handle it at times. And my brother, who's a mastermind and very data-driven and detail-oriented, really dove in and helped me figure out that, hey, you're not collecting deposits. If you collect deposits, you should eliminate this problem. And so that was a huge risk, on a monthly basis. And I did that for almost 2 years until he really helped me dive in and figure out that, hey, you got to collect deposits, because the reality is this is a very cash flow heavy business. And, on top of that, if you have a mistake on 1,000 shirts, that's a problem. How do you go about fixing that and replacing those and indemnifying your customer? And so that's what comes to mind. I think the biggest thing is just eliminating the risk and being, planning ahead. Like I said, I feel every entrepreneur takes risks. It's just some are greater than others, and how can you offset some of that risk?
Heard, yeah. With there are now. I'm thinking this episode might have to have like a, not necessarily a thesaurus, but what's it called? Like a where you define all the words at the end of the book. Parallel entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. You just mentioned bootstrapping as a concept. And then one that came up quickly, and then I wanted you to continue into the story, was the idea of a lifestyle business. Maybe we take a second, just point at lifestyle business as opposed to the businesses that you're running right now. Would you classify them as lifestyle? Would you classify them as something else, something perhaps more meaningful? Lifestyle entrepreneurship was another, I'll call it, cultural phenomenon, started perhaps before, but definitely made most popular by the Tim Ferriss 4-Hour Work Week that led to a Chris, Gallibo $100 startup and more. So I'm wondering, how would you define lifestyle business, lifestyle entrepreneur versus what, and how does that compare to who you are today?
Yeah, great question. I feel like a lifestyle entrepreneur is really somebody that creates a business or some sort of revenue around their lifestyle. So if I am a single person that wants to go move to Indonesia because the rent is $500, hold on one second. If I am a single person that wants to live in Indonesia for $500 a month, well, obviously my lifestyle can be scaled back significantly. Or even Costa Rica. It's one of my favorite places. I'd love to even retire there part of the year. at some point in, the next 20, 30 years, hopefully. But a lifestyle entrepreneur is really just designing a business around their lifestyle. And that's much harder to do fast forward where I'm at now. If I have 3 people in my family, including a little girl that relies on, income, and that's a much more challenging business to justify. I think it's great. And in fact, I'd say that my start into entrepreneurship was a lifestyle business, either with car wash and going to movies, or washing cutting grass to buy a dirt bike, or the newest flip skateboard that came out. That was something that was driving my lifestyle and my interest. And I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs like myself start. But definitely, I wouldn't consider any of my businesses at this point lifestyle, because we've got a pretty decent team, and we have a lot of people that help us make up who we are as a business. And so I'd say lifestyle would be more of like a solopreneur. You can even add that, or a web-trepreneur, where they're working off the web. And yeah, I think it's a great spot to start, and I think it's much easier to attain being a lifestyle entrepreneur versus, hey, I want to start a company, get 10 employees, and I want to service every company in the state of North Carolina. Mm-hmm. That's a much harder challenge, but I think in your entrepreneurial endeavor, you can land there.
Sure. I think you did a great job defining lifestyle entrepreneur. Typically, they look to be in their 20s, and it's often the first place people will go. And it seems to me that a lifestyle entrepreneur might leverage your business in some way to sell T-shirts that speak to a brand that they're starting, or a YouTube channel that they've launched. Wonderful. Is there anything in your entrepreneurial story that we might have missed that you want to call out? Maybe tenets that you try and hold to? If you're Thomas the Tank Engine, is there a think I can that you tell yourself often? Anything like that?
Yeah, I guess we didn't talk much on my coffee truck endeavor. Nature bound. I've always been really passionate about coffee, and really enjoyed coffee. Got into different types of roasting and beans and where they come from. And long story short, I don't know if anyone on this podcast remembers, Izzy's Coffee had a coffee truck that used to set up, I believe, at Luella's on Merriman Avenue. At one point in time, I believe about 3 years ago, I got really excited about the possibility of a coffee truck. It was something that I wouldn't say was a success, but I definitely took a positive light out of it because I learned a lot. But really jumped the gun, had the idea, couldn't let it go. We used it to try to help with promoting Nature Bound and tied it into Nature Bound, and did 2 events. I realized that I signed myself up to be the first person at the event. I have to get up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. to prep and clean, and the challenges that come with a food truck or even just a coffee truck are, you don't have the simple time-saving times, like your cleaning supplies go here, and so it was really just from the hip, all kinds of crazy stuff. But the best part I learned about the coffee truck was I had the only solar-powered coffee truck in the world, to my knowledge. So back to my brother being the mastermind and mechanical, he helped me convert the entire truck to solar-powered, and it could run. I wouldn't run the whole thing on solar, but it could for an hour or 2. But if you try to find a solar-powered food truck, see if you can find it. But then on top of that, a coffee truck. There's usually food trucks with solar, but it couldn't run 100%, which was pretty cool. But learned a lot, and actually ended up getting all the money that I put back in with selling the truck. And when you came to, if you were to see the truck, which, like I said, I only did 2 events, I mean, people would just flock and just ask, how did you do this? What is this? Cool. It was a really cool project, but it was one that I had to bow out of and realize that, I'm not as interested in this as I thought I would be. So,
well, I love that that's the last story, because it seemed like it seemed like everything you've touched, you've ridden till the wheels fall off. And I see coffee. My dad My dad is a small business owner. I would not say that my dad is an entrepreneur. He's a small business owner, and he's been in the coffee game for about a decade now, and it's rough, man. He worked at he had the lease to a train station cafe, right? So all of our area of New Jersey primarily travels into New York City. Yeah. And so, let's say the first train into New York might have been like a 4:59 or a 5:15. I don't even know. So he's in to set up to be there and ready for when the first rush of, grumpy finance folk who need to be there for, 5 hours before the market starts or whatever. You can love coffee, but you're asking a lot, and so then it really becomes a question of do you want to work in the business or do you want to work on the business? And that's one of my favorite distinctions from a book called The E-Myth, and I think V2 is E-Myth Revisited. But I see that if we're going to define entrepreneur. Versus small business owner, I see that as a huge distinction. Small business owners are wonderful, are incredible. I identify more as a small business owner than an entrepreneur if I'm giving myself, a true assessment, because everything I've done, I've worked hard in the business, have intentionally not necessarily gone to try and grow with heads or grow with tech or grow so that I could pull myself out of the weeds. And so hats off to you for not losing your shirt, making a coffee truck business and letting it go. That's fantastic.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Of course. I mean, you can't ask for much more than learning something and not losing a ton of money. Yeah. Or even a little bit of money. That's great. Yeah. So tell me, we're hard transition to life in Western North Carolina, life in Asheville. When I say Asheville and community, what comes up for you?
Amazing. I mean, one word, amazing. But if I had to dive in further, I remember the first place I lived when I moved here in 2009 was right behind the Walk on Waynesville Avenue. I remember January 1st, 2009, when I moved here, for the first year solid, there wasn't a day that goes by skateboarding on Haywood Road or biking, It seems like there's a lot of really cool local businesses here, and the community really supports local business. And for years, I said, I'm gonna have a business on Haywood Road, and I'm gonna have a business in West Asheville. And I'm super thankful for the community. There's some amazing relationships and partnerships and just people that live here. I feel like Asheville, while it's a small city, we have, resources and top level thinkers and people like yourself that really want to connect and meet other like-minded individuals and just give back. The whole keep it local, stay local. That's a huge piece of, there's not a week that goes by that a customer comes in and says, we were going to go online, but we really wanted to work with a local company. And so we're super thankful for the community, for Asheville, and just the mindset that we have here is very unique. And I feel like I'm privileged and lucky to say that I live here. I love leaving town and then coming back into Asheville and just saying this is my home. And West Asheville, even more specific, is everything.
Love that. With you mentioned earlier, perhaps you were an early adopter in overland vehicles. What do you do when not printing, taking care of a 13-month-old, or dreaming up your next business?
Yeah, good question. Definitely done a lot of off-road vehicle. I've got a cool Toyota 4Runner over the years. We've taken out and discovered really cool trails, and I like being outside. I like traveling. I like going to new places, restaurants, coffee shops. There's another thing we didn't really talk about, but I did this 2-month road trip with my brother for our web company. It was called Big Town Small Business, and that got to market. We got to travel. We got to meet new people. I got to connect with similar business owners and ask them questions, how, why, and learning is something that I definitely think that is a daily, multiple times a day, that is fun to me. Learning is running with a podcast or connecting with somebody, or just having fun and asking questions. From a very young age, I was the guy looking up at people and asking questions, and I used to say, ask the most ridiculous questions, and at the time I didn't know, but day in, day out, people would say, ha ha ha, why are you asking all these questions? Are you writing a book? But the reality was I was taking in knowledge and information. And so I love learning. I love traveling. I love people. I love getting energy from new places and new people. And I love nature.
Dang.
And printing is also amazing. I love it.
Are your brothers older than you?
I'm the youngest of three.
Youngest of three. I have an older brother, and I think that a lot of your story feels like close to home. And so I'll say, I don't know if I asked you, maybe I asked a lot of questions. I don't know, but I vividly remember at some point recognizing that, like, oh, I learn from seeing what my older brother does, and maybe not doing that, or like, okay, that didn't work. So, and I can remember moments of being like, hold on to that. Okay, that's good to know. Like, oh, hold on to that. That's good to know. And learning by observing and asking a bunch of questions and being like, what happens underneath this rock? Being a curious kid. Is there anything right now that is, I'll say, is your next frontier? Golf cart sounds like it might be it, but like concepts that have your curiosity, like where are you spending a free minute of mental energy these days?
I've been spending a lot of energy trying to focus, quite honestly, and I'm very happy with the print shop and just nature bound, and I think I'm at a place now where I mentioned golf carts. It's definitely a side hustle. I might spend an hour a week or maybe an hour or two a month. It's really just something I'm doing for fun that I'm passionate about. But I think I'm happy where I'm at. That doesn't mean a year from now I won't have the next idea in my head that just won't go out. It's just always on fire. But got a great team, and I think there's just a lot of potential. I mean, we were thankful with the pandemic last year. Things completely died for 2 months. And if you would have told me that was going to happen, I would have said, no way. There's no way I'm not going to get a single order in a month, because that's never happened. And like the only way that would happen is if the world stops. And so that happened.
The world stopped, yeah.
We slowly recovered and rebounded.
Wow.
We're not at the capacity where we were, but I'm excited about this year. I'm excited about things going somewhat back to normal. And I think that between Asheville Print Shop and Screen Printing and Nature Bound Co., we're going to have an amazing year. We've got an awesome team in place, and I think there's a lot of growth coming for us this year. And the reality is I really just need to hunker down and focus on that. And focus is going to be on my radar for the next year, maybe two, just because of time. Time is the one thing that you can't get more of. You can make more money, you can meet more people, you can go more places, but you'll never be able to get back time. And so I've realized that, and it's an asset, and it's one of the most important assets. And I think that is a struggle for every entrepreneur, is like, how do I, or business owner, how do I get more time? How do I create another version of myself and do more things in the amount of time? How do I be more productive? And so productivity, focus, that's on my mind this year. I'm going to try to stay away from ideas and businesses and just hunker down and focus.
I think you might have stolen a page out of my notebook for 2021. I hear that. I support that. Wonderful. I ask, is there anything that we have not touched that is sitting like top of mind, front of mind, however you think about your mind, that you might want to focus feels important? Does that look like meditation? Does that look like planning daily? Otherwise, the next question is, how do people find you on the World Wide Web, support you, follow along?
Yeah. Let's see. I guess you can find me or find us, Naturebound Co. on Instagram. I'd say that's where we're most active. You can also find Asheville Print Shop on Instagram, and inside there's links and details and examples. I also have a personal website. I haven't updated in quite some time, but it gives you a little bit more information about me. It's jacobballard.com. And stop by our shop, 740 Haywood Road. Say hello if you want. Look us up online. Let us know if you have any ideas you just want to talk about. If you're an entrepreneur and you want to connect, reach out to me. Keep supporting this podcast. I like what you're doing. I think you're doing a great job, and I'm very passionate about connecting with fellow entrepreneurs and supporting other businesses, and just meeting people that share the same mindset. And then if you just have any questions or you want to bounce any ideas off, reach out to me on my website. I'll try to help brainstorm or help you start your lifestyle business if you want.
I love that. Thank you. I loved this conversation. I feel like we are birds of a feather. I'm so glad that we got to connect. I'm so glad this podcast exists, so we got to hang out this morning, and I appreciate your time. We'll talk soon.
Appreciate you. Thanks so much for the opportunity.